Hello, everyone. Welcome. I want you to think about a couple of questions. The questions very simply are, what does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to make someone pay who has hurt you? So those are always in creative tension. So keep your eyes open, your ears open, as you actually hear and see the gospel.
And this is the gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus, but the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he addressed them with this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf?' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'"
As I reflect on this parable, what I almost find myself saying, there wasn't only just one lost son, but there was 2 lost sons. And to some extent, the father was lost, but something in his life made him look at life in a whole different way. So let's break it open practically. First, the son deeply hurt the father. When they say he's going to give the estate, the older son had 2/3 of the estate when the father died, and the younger son had 1/3. So what the younger son got was 1/3 of the estate. The father still had 2/3 of the estate. But in the village, he was sort of a laughing stock, the father, because he actually gave the money to his son. And then the son went off and squandered it. So in many ways, you have to ask the question, why did the son, the youngest son, do what he did? He was almost like saying to his father, I'm going to treat you like you're dead, because he was asking for his piece of the action of the estate. But one of the things that you have to begin to realize, was the father himself a strong taskmaster? Was he, in a way, demanding of the both boys? One boy succumbed to it and did everything his father said, and the other boy, I probably wrestled with and struggled with it, and one day he probably said, I'm out of here, it's too much. And so the father had to face himself after his son left and had to deal with what happened. Now, parents, you all know when one of your children mess up and do things that are very hurtful. When you see that and know that, one of the first responses is to say, what did I do wrong? And so I'm sure the father had to deal with that pulsating question, what did I do wrong to make my son treat me this way, to make me a laughingstock of the community I live in, and to somehow just go off like I'm dead, I don't exist? What did I do? And we all know, in many ways, sometimes we do things, not maybe even consciously, but unintentionally, to be able to do things that may be hurtful. We can maybe say the son was a sort of a very sensitive kid, he was a kid who wrestled with things in life, and that he just felt, I needed to get out from under this oppressive force, oppressive force. So he went off and did his thing. He squandered his money, and in that process, he was afraid to go back. He was afraid to go back. And so he says, okay, I'll try to work. But then what happened? A tremendous famine covered the land. And then he realized that even if I did little work, I couldn't get enough food to eat. And then he realized that if he continued on this journey, that he would probably get very sick and maybe even die. So he said to himself, in the suffering, I'm going to go back and try to talk to my father. So let's just move over to the father. I'm sure the father began to think about, because it was not only he probably went away for a couple of years to do what he had to do with his son. So the father was beginning to think about, what did I do to hurt my son so? And so what he asked the Lord to give him the grace to forgive. I need to forgive my son. I gotta forgive my son for maybe not understanding who he was or how he related to life. And as he really asked for the gift of forgiveness in his heart to his son, he began to open his heart to God's wonderful healing power of the wound that his son inflicted on him. So what happened was, as he was healed, and he prayed for that ache in his heart to be healed, he began to look at life in a whole new way, began to look at it as a son in a whole new way. And in that peace, he felt a freedom, because he experienced God's profound forgiveness for himself. And because he had that profound experience inside himself of God's forgiveness, he was able to give it away to his son, if his son ever did come back. So what happens? The son decides, I'm going to go back to see my father, and I'm going to say, listen, I can't be your son because what I did to you. I can't even be a slave. Hire me as a hire worker, which was the lowest of low, which means that anytime he could be kicked out. So he humbled himself, the son, because he also had a wrestle with, what did I just do to my father? How did I hurt him? Even though he was going back. He didn't go back with an arrogance. He didn't go back with anything else but a sense of, Father, please forgive me for what I have done to you, where he said, I've sinned against you and against God. Please forgive me. I don't ask to be reinstated into the family. I just want to be able to eat. Just eat, because I know you have food. So what happened? The father saw the son from a distance. He ran out, embraced him, even before his son was able to say, Father, please forgive me. Because the father had bursting inside of him this God's forgiveness towards him. And whenever you have God's gift, whether it's the gift of love, the gift of healing, the gift of forgiveness, it wants to express itself. So he gave to his son the gift that his father gave to him. And that's why he said, son, come, I'm going to make you part of the family again. And I'm going to celebrate by getting a calf and cooking it and giving it and calling the Trinity together. And because you came back with a contrite heart. And I love you so much. And so that's why that happened. Now let's look at the brother. The brother was a dutiful son. He did what his father said. And I said the father could have been very demanding. He did it. And probably at a part of himself, he rejected inside of himself the father. But he didn't want to cause confusion. But he was upset with that his father was asking him to do all these things and et cetera and et cetera. But he didn't say, I'm going to get out of town. I said, I'll do it. I'll be the obedient son. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. But inside, there was seething anger on that piece. And then when he was coming back and he saw that his brother was celebrated, and I'm sure maybe the father didn't ever celebrate neither son, but he finally celebrated this son who hurt him deeply, his father, but also himself. Because he was left to do more work. He was more under the father's command to get the thing done here in order to continue to survive. So he was angry, and rightly so. And he basically said, listen, he needs to be punished, not forgiven. He needs to be punished. He needs to be that hired servant. And maybe someday we'll let him back in again. And so he was lost, because somehow, some way, he had unforgiveness in his heart towards his brother. Because maybe he was never open to God's forgiveness, because he did everything, quote, right. He had a self-righteousness, even though he had inside a really serious struggle with who his father was and then who his brother was. And so we got to look at the others, that son, and say, yes, he was just as lost. And what he has to do is the same thing the father did, the same thing the brother did. And that is come to his senses and say to God, give me the grace to forgive my brother. And also open my heart to heal the wound that my brother caused me, so that I can give away not only your forgiveness towards my brother and my father, but also that I can love them in a whole new way. It's interesting that the story was not finished, but that's what I feel what happened. That in many ways, the three of them got together, the two sons and the father, and they related to each other in a whole new way, a way of love towards one another, and a way to celebrate the goodness of each other. Thank you.